Once in a dark and gloomy forest, a pack of wolves surrounded a lone warrior. Their leader was a furious beast of enormous size and intelligence. Stepping forward amidst the aggressive growls of the other pack members, he addressed the brave warrior, asking him how he intended to fight them without sharp fangs or powerful claws. However, in just a moment the lone warrior no longer appeared as weak and defenseless as he did before amongst the encircling wolves who were growling menacingly. There was another creature. It stood on all fours, leaning its head toward the ground, propping itself up with two powerful claw paws. Its skin, covered in spikes resembling scales, was jet black, and the next moment the creature rose onto its hind legs, standing at full height. This creature turned out to be a humanoid lizard with a menacing toothy smile and eyes that shone with bright red light. It also possessed a powerful physique that struck fear into anyone who looked at it. However, even after witnessing this, the pack leader was not inclined to retreat and let out a fierce howl. Following their leader's command, the wolves viciously attacked, but despite their numerical advantage, they still had no chance. The humanoid lizard effortlessly dispatched them one by one, using its clawed paw to swiftly end each wolf's life. This was because the lizard-like creature's primary weapon was not its teeth and claws but sweat and blood, flesh and bones. Stepping on the next wolf with its clawed paw, it instantaneously took the creature's life. At the same time, the pack leader, with rage in its eyes, watched as its kin were mercilessly destroyed by the once feeble warrior. Unable to bear it any longer, it let out a furious roar, then opened its massive jaws with sharp fangs and lunged at the lizard-like monster, but victory was not in the cards for it. In the next moment, the humanoid lizard intercepted the pack leader attack, grabbing it by the jaw with its strong clawed paw. Addressing the furious creature it held, the lizard said that it consumed the bodies of its enemies and used them as its weapons. After sinking its sharp teeth into the wolf pack leader's throat, it declared with a bloodthirsty voice that it would kill him, and by devouring him it would become even stronger. In this world of magical beings with unique abilities, they were referred to as mystical creatures. A small number of people were also granted the ability to transform into mystical creatures. They served as prophets who worked for the betterment of humanity. But as always, where there was good, there was also evil. In this world there existed embodiments of this divine power, which people referred to with trepidation as the demonic god. In the midst of a dark forest, a man was running. His silhouette was shrouded in darkness, while his breathing was erratic and heavy, rushing with all his might on his exhausted legs. The young man, with tears in his eyes and a desperate voice, was no longer able to scream. His vision was blurred, and he moved only by fear and survival instincts. The reason he was fleeing was an arrow loaded into a crossbow and aimed directly at his back. In the next moment, the sound of the released bowstring resounded, followed immediately by the painful cry of the fleeing man who was struck in the back by the arrow. Right after that, a joyful male voice could be heard laughing and celebrating the accuracy of his shot. The owner of the voice was a bald, middle-aged man dressed in light armor, holding a crossbow in his hands. Another man with long hair praised him for the shot. The sharpshooter proudly responded with a smirk that it was quite easy. The attacker's sword dripped with blood after murders, for men lay in their own blood without signs of life. Their attempt to defend themselves had been unsuccessful, as there were more enemies, and thus their foes celebrated victory, while those who had lost forever froze on the cold forest ground. Before sunset, they needed to take anything of value, no matter how small. The bandits quickly searched the bodies and claimed their reward. It's just a feeling, but today the forest feels particularly eerie, said one of the criminals, and with these words the group of criminals began their journey. A group of 9 criminals walked through a natural alley of majestic trees which, when darkness fell upon the forest, took on eerie shapes. The group was in good spirits, due to their easy pickings. A sarcastic voice came from the crowd. What monster could be in this forest, and why would it be watching us right now? The crowd laughed in response. Wait, shouted the group's leader, who was walking ahead. Everyone froze. The closest killer's face was covered in sweat, and even his thick beard and the hair hanging over his forehead couldn't hide his fear. He wasn't alone in this feeling. Another criminal standing nearby shared his unease. It was evident even from beneath the black hood he wore. One of the bandits, who stood at the center of the group and couldn't see anything, couldn't hold back and asked, "What's their animal carcasses?" The bandit replied heavily. His gaze revealed a horrifying sight. The trees were marked with claw marks from some creature, and some of them were torn in half and scattered on the ground. On one of the fallen trees hung the lifeless body of a dead wolf. Mutilated animal bodies were strewn all over. Even in semi-darkness, the gray bodies were clearly visible. Their eyes had lost their gleam, and bloody puddles flowed from their mouths. Martin, the bandit with slick back hair and a 3-day stubble, knelt down to examine the nearest body. Enormous chunks of flesh had been torn from the gray creature's body, exposing its bones. The bearded man approached his comrade and asked if this might have been a territorial battle, as one pack might have clashed with another, leading to a fight. The answer from the criminal disturbed everyone. I'm not sure, but it looks like they were cut down unilaterally. It's something powerful. The bandit, examining the bodies nearby, suddenly exclaimed that the leader should take a look. Martin and two of his closest comrades got up and headed to where the man was pointing. This is the corpse of a mythical creature, one of the bandits said. The carcass of a massive black wolf with deep gashes on its hide. Some areas of the skin had been ripped off along with the flesh. The beast hadn't gone down without a fight. Bloody traces were everywhere, but the men were not captivated by the dead beast. Instead, they were fixated on the young man leaning against the wolf's carcass. It seemed as though the young man was dead. He had short black hair, a muscular torso, and a commanding presence. The youth's attire was somewhat peculiar, with a broad belt featuring an emblem resembling a dragon's head. His upper body was bare, and his arms, starting from the shoulders, were jet black. He wore armored gauntlets on his wrists. His pants and boots were unremarkable. Sorting their thoughts, the bandit with the hood and his men approached closer. The man immediately noticed that the body behind them was the leader of the pack. What could this scoundrel be doing here? Martin asked, looking at the bowed head of the youth as they gazed at the carcass of the once fearsome beast whose fangs appeared ready to tear people to shreds. The bandit wondered if this young man could have killed the magical creature before he could finish voicing his thought. Martin replied, telling him not to speak nonsense. No one cares how this vagrant got here. Martin approached the guy even closer and stretched out his hand, saying that he needed to see if he had anything useful before the bandit could realize his plan. A sharp pain shot through his leg, and he couldn't hold back his scream. What is wrong with this stupid lizard? The red lizard, the size of a yard dog, clawed at the bandit's leg. Get away from me, the bandit shouted, trying to shake the attacker off his leg. With a smile on his face, the bandit who had shot the young man with a crossbow some time ago approached Martin, but now he was holding a different weapon, a hunting knife. Don't move, Martin, he said. I will cut him in two, he added. Then he swung and struck. Suddenly the man felt a terrible pain in his arm. Looking at the place of the greatest pain, he saw only a blood fountain, where his arm should have been. His punch at the lizard never reached the target. Instead, his arm was cut off by a one-handed battle axe. A scream of pain spread through the forest. The bandits' comrades prepared to fight. When they saw their comrade's hand cut off by a stranger they thought was dead. Before the one-armed man could say a word, the fist of the stranger, who had just gotten to his feet and was ready to fight, flew into his face. The bandit's face was deformed by the force of the blow. Blood seemed to be pouring out of his mouth. Oh, not touch him without my permission, the stranger said with an almost